do whatever, transition or start. You're the girl.
Okay. All right. So here we are. Hi, everybody. I'm Kara Kedwalader, and I'm here with my dear, sweet mama sister friend, Leanne Tibiatowski. And we're going to be having a conversation about raising boys and children in this Me Too era and what that might look like. So I wanted to give some context to why we're having this conversation, and then speak a little into, how important it is to be talking about this, to be speaking up and using our voices as, the people in the world are so willingly doing at this time. So I'm a mama to a 3-year-old boy, and last year was challenging for our family. I moved through an extremely physically challenging pregnancy, which resulted in my second first-term miscarriage in 2 years. And at that same time, my partner and I were moving through challenges around our financial security and him trying to switch up his work, his predominant clients. And then, of course, our son at the same time started to display behaviors of rage and aggression. And what that looked like is we have a 18-month-old toddler who also lives with us. So she's with us Monday through Friday full time, and then is with her dad on the weekends. And when they first moved in, she was just a baby, and he was so sweet and gentle. And then she became a toddler, and she's able to walk over to where he's playing and knock down and destroy what he's working on. She's able just to get into his stuff. And so there was a shift in his behavior towards pushing her down, behaving more maliciously, wanting to hurt her, it appeared. And at one point, he even made a comment to me that he wished she was dead. And I really freaked out about that. I know he knows what death is. I even checked in afterwards. I was like, what if I said that about your dad? And his immediate gut response was no, like, don't say that about dad. So I know he knows, and I felt scared. I called my partner and asked for help and what to do. And just, I was filled with a lot of dread and fear. And then the behaviors continued, and there were just incidents with a few kids at our co-op here at the house where he's interacting in what looks like play, that all of a sudden within a matter of seconds, he was triggered by something, and he pushes the child into a rocking chair and says, when we lean in to find out what's going on, says, I want to push her in there and squish her. And again, this fear inside of me, and on that day, I felt embarrassed and as though I had created this, that it was a reflection of my parenting, and I felt some shame and guilt, and I didn't know what to do. And so I spent 2 hours checked out on social media. And then I kind of came back to myself, and I realized that my behavior was a little bit narcissistic. Like, he's not me. He's his own person. And me thinking that his behavior is simply about me is not really being of service to my child. And so even though I felt really afraid, I decided to talk about it. And one of the places I spoke about it was on Facebook. And I just mentioned what we were moving through, asked for some help or advice. And Leanne was so gracious in offering some of your experience with your now 21-year-old son and what it looked like to raise him, and tips and tools you had for managing the big feelings, which is really what underlies, right, this topical behavior. And I noticed in the thread that, wow, lots of women were chiming in and wanting to know what these tips and tools are and to talk about this. So here we are. We're here to just kind of, I want to start this conversation, and I want to have it in community. And when I began talking about it, I talked about it with everyone, with my partner, with everyone we co-parent with, which is our 2 roommates, one of whom has the 18-year-old 18-month-old toddler with my son's school teacher, and just talking about it in a way that's not shameful. It's not bad. It's wanting to help him navigate, right? Which must feel like really intense energy in his body, and help guide him to healthier expressions of it. Help guide him to know that it's okay to have these feelings, and that there are ways that we can express them that works for the whole. So here we are, and thank you, Leanne, for being here. And I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your experience.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Kara, for creating the conversation and being willing to be so very authentic about that, which is so very human. Mm-hmm. When we attempt to push away those things that are uncomfortable and are intense, we're not modeling all that we can be with our children. And it takes courage, in my opinion, to put it on the table. So I have great respect for you putting it on the table. I have been in an interesting season in my life, enjoying kind of sitting back on social media and seeing friends and people in my circle who have little ones, and it's really like lovely for me to be able to watch and see. And it's just been dawning on me recently, really the wide range view that I have now. It's frankly hard for me to believe that I have a child that is 21. That is amazing in and of itself. So what I know is that I could have used even more resource in the form of community. I love what I'm seeing created in, like what you're creating with your children and with adults and families. I wasn't tapped into as much as that when I was making my way through. So it was pretty wild at times. So I got pregnant with my beautiful son, Travis, on my graduation vacation from college. I had a very lovely road trip back with an unexpected graduation gift. And it was a really good trip. Awesome. And didn't have a lot of children, young children in the family, you know, so I was like kind of figuring everything out, having some alternative ways of thinking about being in the world, and not surrounded with a lot of people with children that had those similar points of views. And so the adventure began. And basically, the day that I brought him home, I was supposed to have him in a birth center, and I ended up having to be in the hospital. So right away, everything didn't kind of go out in that idyllic kind of way, but all good. So the day that I brought him home, I remember just having these thoughts about how I wanted to encourage him to be all he could be in the world, and to tap into his spirit and let it shine, and all the good things that we want to. You can be anybody you want to be, those kind of cliche things. And it just came in really strong that day that in order for him to believe anything that I say, I had to be willing to live that myself. And that's really when a deep dive for me initiated into having integrity as a tour guide. And that's really how I've seen my role with my son, is as his tour guide. And he, out the gate, well, even inside, was very energetic and also highly sensitive. And I would prefer to call that highly aware. You know, sensitive is something people can have some connotations to that aren't necessarily complete to me. So I became a single mom 2 weeks in, and stayed that way through the journey, which makes it even more of an interesting journey to understand the dynamic of a young man and how to best help him on his journey. Because I realized right away the other thing that was going to be very painful is the whole thing is about letting go. The person that was closer to me than any other person in the world will ever be, because I had only one child living inside of me, is all about letting him go and helping him to fly. And that, as you know, brings up a lot. And it can be very scary in this world, which is even more escalated now than when my son was 3, 4, 2. You know, there's a lot of heavy stuff going on right now. So these highly aware little ones, they feel it all. They're vibing on all of it. It's running through their bodies. So in my commitment to help my son as his tour guide to make it through all these phases and all the hoops, whether it's, you know, preschool or the park or kindergarten, all the way to 12th grade. And it's been, you know, it's cool to have all of these milestones. Now I'm able to see the whole thread. It's a powerful point of view. And that's why it was important to me to speak up and offer, you know, I don't know everything, but I definitely, having an empathic, powerful young man. He wasn't just highly aware and sensitive. He is like a warrior. Boom! Big space, you know? And so there was a lot of different tactics that I either had intuitively, learned on the fly, researched, found mentors, professionals. Like, I was constantly growing and also doing my personal work at the same time. My mission was to help him get through life retaining his spirit. These guys are warriors. Their job is to test and find out where the edges are. If we were back in, you know, I don't know what that show's called, but like medieval times, we would want to be with the guys that could scope out, know where the edges are. You know, we would be applauding that. The challenge that our current day experiences when raising children is that the paradigm we expect them, we the collective, is not one that they're going to succeed in. It's a box that we're trying to push them through, where those traits of warrior become something bad and quickly become something that gets pathologized.
Right.
What can we, it's, okay, we're in this room and there's 25 kids and they're all wiggling around and I have to get through X, Y, and Z, and that one's bouncing and this one's running and bounce, 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 bounce must be bad because I can't, you know, just all of that becomes a label. And then potentially a spirit sucker, you know? So protecting their spirit is, that became my main objective. And there's a lot of things that I can say. It's important for me to kind of call out that creating the awareness that is required to begin to honor the young warriors, little girls, little boys, all of them, is to create space in ourselves for them and with them that allows for increased emotional intelligence. We're feeling beings. I want to have big feelings. I'm a very passionate person. And that's really beautiful and fun sometimes, and other times, not so much fun. However, to have that really fun, amazing, powerful, gorgeous juiciness, I get to have both sides of that. And neither one of them are wrong. And if I can be in conversation with my child, your child, my sister, with you, in ways that allows me to be with those feelings, recognize where they live in me, channel them, And then we're creating a supportive environment for us to be who we are, not stuffing, not trying to fit in, not trying to be who we're not. So emotional intelligence, there's a couple other things. I don't know. Do you want to dive into something a little bit different instead of me just going? Because I could go.
I love what you're sharing. Whatever you want to share, please.
All right. Well, I think just to complete what I think is our responsibility.
Yeah.
Or our opportunity. It's really an opportunity.
Yeah.
Is not only just the emotional intelligence, but increasing a commitment to mindful communication.
Yeah.
Together. When we have those big feelings, how can we communicate about them? Mm-hmm. You know, in ways that we can create understanding. And when there can be a pause enough to communicate about the big feeling, and you can model how to do that safely. When a big feeling is up, if you have a routine, a model, or a ritual that is how you express that, then you create space. It dissipates. And then you get to see what's underneath that. You get to discover it, which is so powerful. And that was one of the things that I was really blessed to have modeled for me. After Travis went to preschool for a while, and that was a really intense experience. Beautiful little preschool, but he was big and bouncy, and well, hello, I love it. And so the most unique observation that I got from a lovely instructor at this preschool was that my son was so aware that he was aware of what his classmates were feeling before they were.
So empathetic.
Powerful, right? Yeah. There's many that might be listen to this or be engaged in this conversation that would find that exquisite.
Yeah. Yeah.
It quickly became pathologized. And I think it's this. Sensory integration was what she called it. And, you know, it doesn't matter what it was to me. It's like, what do we do with that? And what we did with that was not go into traditional school or public schools after preschool. I was really blessed to have been connected with a woman who was a credentialed teacher in Canada, and she had a homeschool that had 11 max, but mostly around 7 or 8 kids, and they had individual curriculum. If everybody was wiggly, they went out to Julian or to the beach, and they would apply their lessons to what was going on in nature. Or they would, you know, if it was math and the child liked dinosaurs, and that's how they did their math, you know. But the most valuable thing I got from this instructor was a model for communication, very similar to nonviolent communication, where you are, you know, identifying feelings, making requests, confirming that hearing happened, and then letting someone else have a turn. So these children and us as parents practiced over and over and over and over again for years. If there was, and there was plenty, you know, it's great. Yeah, even if you have 7 kids and they're learning about dinosaurs and they love dinosaurs, they still have big feelings. You know, it's just less of an unrealistic environment. So it would be just like a bridge over and over again, making these bridges. When you do this, I feel like that. Boom. What is the feeling? Connected to naming my feeling. My request is for you too. Are you willing to do that? You know, and just going back and forth, back and forth. That stayed with my son and with me for the rest of his schooling, to the point that when he did go into the public school system, that he was blowing away the adults by when he was given space, that he could actually hold that space. And be in self-responsibility, you know, and that was one of our family values. I started to realized that it was important to have an anchor of, you know, and to start to define and talk to him about our family values. And that is one of them, self-responsibility. Game changing when you're navigating through situations where there's other adults, people that are judging, to be able to empower a warrior. And I'm calling, you know, they're the peaceful warriors, whatever you want to call them. But, you know, my son was big presence. He's still a big presence. To empower that big presence with making it okay to say I made a mistake. Or, yeah, I did this and I don't know why I did it. And I can, you know, to be able to speak to that, because at large, I would say it's not okay to be wrong in the hamster wheel story of the national kind of conversation and norms for being social. Win, get to the finish line first, do whatever it takes. And I'm right. It's okay to not be right, you know, and if we can speak that, and if we can empower our children to be able to come from that place, even if their big feelings get them in a pickle, receptivity to accepting and being with that child increases so much. I watched it over and over. It was like keys to the kingdom. And it's not about manipulating a situation. I wasn't teaching my son to manipulate a situation by this tool called self-responsibility. It was like, look what happens when you have the courage to speak authentically and go, you know what, I did do that. Yeah. And this is what I felt like, and this is why, or whatever it is, you know, to be complete, to not take heat beyond what would be appropriate. I just find that agreements and self-responsibility are so important. And then the other thing that I think that we're not really doing as a collective is taking the time to observe and listen to each other, so we meet each other where we're at. Quickly, and in the example of children, a child that is not harmoniously operating in the ecosystem of the classroom, the park, wherever it is, becomes bad, or you know, it makes me uncomfortable. Like, you know, we all want our kids to be doing the right thing and shine and excel, and it threatens what we're creating, or our image as a parent comes up, like you shared, Kara. And I forgot what I was going to say.
Well, let me speak into that, because
please.
You know, I'm still very much, as you just saw, in the toddler phase, and so very much in young parenthood. So you're speaking into emotional intelligence. That's one thing that my partner and I have been very clear with each other about, is once he started speaking in full sentences, our son, it was like, okay, we're going to work with him to use his voice and his words to ask for what he wants. And then we're going to help him to identify what his needs are. Because often, especially at that age, you know, 2, 3, they don't know what their needs are. Yeah. Needs are really basic with children. They're very biological. You're thirsty, you're hungry, you're tired. And it's those feelings usually, that those needs not being met, that can underlie these what's often construed as misbehaviors. But then when this rage and aggressive behavior came up, I did go online to see like what other people had done in the past, and just to find some other tools. And there was the wording around big feelings and helping them to identify the big feelings. So I was able to talk with him, even though he's just barely 3. Okay, so, you know, do you feel mad about this other child living with us? Does it make you feel angry? You know, just giving him that language, and that it's okay to have these feelings, actually.
Yes.
Coming back to, so acknowledging the feelings and making them okay, not shaming them or bad, and then talking about the behaviors and what else we can do. You know, some of the languaging that I use, and he uses really well now, is I need space. I need space. Let me have space. And he does that. He does that with our babysitters so often.
I love that.
Space, you know, and they give him space. And he started saying that to Mia, our roommate, as well, which is really sweet. So a child is never too young to start with these skills, with emotional intelligence.
Agreed.
We're born so intelligent, we're born with this in us. And it's our duty and our job and our love to continue to foster the intelligence, and rather than negating it and think that it's, perhaps not developmentally appropriate or they're not ready for it.
There's always a way to adapt it, absolutely, into the languaging and the exercise, whatever. Like tracking emotions was what I would do with Travis when he was in preschool. And we had a whiteboard, and I would do it with his friends too. Like there would be big emotions that would come up, and someone would be upset, my son or his buddy, and we'd go to the whiteboard, and that whiteboard was on standby. Where do you feel? Where do you feel what you're feeling right now? And we draw a picture. What color is it? What does it look like? Is it angry? And then we would see that spot and breathe into it. Talk about it, breathe into it, send it some love. That's like a powerful thing you can do with a 3-year-old.
Yes.
And a 25-year-old and a 50-year-old.
I haven't even started doing that with Kahlo. I really look forward to beginning to do that part of the developing our emotional intelligence. And I also wanted to speak into so you're sharing about, we want to foster a cultural normalcy around it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to make a mistake. And so us as the adults today now, we need to be modeling this behavior. So my experience in the past with my son being the bitten was I really wish we would have had this open, authentic conversation around, it's not that the behavior is shameful, but rather it's like, let's really address it as it is. Let's call aggressive behavior, and not think that it means anything about us as parents. Or if we think that that's okay, and give voice to that too, so we can release it.
Or your child, that something's wrong with your child.
Right, exactly. And, you're saying that reminded me of one of my best friends from college was in town for the holiday season, and she has a 10-month-old son with her wife. And he, most of his young life up till now, had been demonstrating signs of rage and aggression. And her wife would tell her fairly repeatedly that she felt scared, and she didn't feel like the rise of and the response to the big feelings was equal to, what kind of created it, what the trigger was. And she didn't really listen, she didn't really want to hear that something needed to be tended to. And so now she's found herself in this unfortunate place of her son making comments about self-harming and about, thinking that they'd be better off dead. And so they're seeing a therapist, and there is a label of, a mental health diagnosis that they're now looking at. So to me, this conversation is so important because in this era of Me Too, what's being uncovered is all of this unchecked rage and aggression. So we're not saying that it's bad, right? That's not the point of our conversation here between Leanne and I, that rage and aggression is bad, because it is a completely appropriate response. If somebody approaches me in a menacing way in a dark alley, I got my glass water bottle, and let me tell you, I am extremely aggressive, and I will cut you, okay?
Girl.
Right, and that's appropriate, and that is how we want to raise human beings, right? So that we also evolve beyond this victim mentality where we're fleeing from our bodies and the moment, and we're freezing because we're scared. So I want to really acknowledge rage and aggression. And that was my experience with my son. Like when I pulled my head out of my butt and I was like, you know what, rage, seriously, when I got out of my little narcissist
laugh.
And I turned towards it and I said, yes, I carry rage and aggression myself. And it is a power, it's a tool, and I use it to create. That's what I'm creating with. It's this power, this intense energy that burns inside of me. and as an adult, I mean, I was certainly raised with models of a destructive use of this power, and it was abusive emotionally and physically. And I, taught me, like, if that doesn't feel good, I don't want to perpetuate that. So I'm going to do my best as this human now to not be destructive with it. And so literally as soon as I turned towards my son and said, you know what, we are going to work with this, and we are going to channel it into the martial arts, into wrestling, into whatever it is to feed that warrior soul, but we are not going to squash it. As soon as I said that to the universe, it went poof, and it was gone. I mean, it was so amazing. It was just like, literally, my roommates were like, oh my God, like, it was gone. And it was so much of my own fear, right? Of like, it's in the shadow. It's this thing that I feel like comes down through my ancestral DNA, and it's bad and it's wrong. And it's like, as soon as I just honored it of, no, it's not. It's using it in healthy expressions. And so I wanted to talk about that because, you had mentioned in one of our emails back and forth around Travis's experience with the medieval reenactment. And there's just, yes. Can you speak about that?
Yeah, that was such a glorious find. And actually the same teacher that he went to homeschool with turned us on to it. And it's called the Society for Creative Anachronism. And you can go to these events where they recreate medieval times. It's not a Ren fair. It's a place where there's people that are scholars in the areas that they're into, whether it's like weaving or natural dye or working, many, there's food making. They'll build ovens, and everything gets called out. And there's also medieval combat martial arts, or the opportunity to hit each other with sticks, which is very appealing to boys. Well, they're swords, not sticks, made out of PVC pipe with padding. Like they've gone to great lengths to figure out how to make these safely. And what's really cool about it is, as a little boy or a little girl, you can have an opportunity to get very, very physical under the premise of honor and chivalry. And there's knights and kings and a queen that will be there. It's really like awe. I had awe the first time that I went, and Travis, big presence. He did really well. Like, there's tournaments, and you meet other kids, and there's families, and it was really, really helpful, especially for me as a single mother to a strong, powerful young man. There were men willing, they volunteer their time to do these tournaments and to teach them how to play safely with each other. And they teach them what chivalry means, and they get awards for community service and volunteering, and get a lot of energy out. And that's part of it. Sitting with devices, or the way that the dominant number of our youth are spending time, it makes me think of the dog whisperer. To have your dog be healthy and happy, they need to run. To have your child be healthy and expressing themselves healthy, they need to run.
Yes.
So why not run someplace where you can do those things that little boys and girls kind of want to do in a safe way that is designed around honor and chivalry? It was great, great, great influence for our family.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Check it out.
That's Society for Creative.
You get to dress up. Yes. Society for Creative Anachronism, SCA.
Yeah.
They're everywhere. It's a huge nonprofit, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And we would go and camp. We would go to many different events. Full disclosure, at nighttime, there's a lot of parties that the adults partake in. And when my son turned close to, well, he looked like he was a teenager before he was a teenager. He's very tall and always looked older. Kind of stopped bringing there's been a break because there's a lot there is when you're an adult, there's a lot of adult activities in the evening, but it's great. There's a quiet area to camp always. Sleepy Hollow is what it's sometimes called, where the families hang out, and good fun.
So sweet. It sounds so sweet. I also want to give you mad props. Single mothers like yourself deserve all the props in the world, all the support. I can't even imagine. There's no way in heck I could be a mother without my partner. Just given all of it. It's so challenging. Sleep alone, the sleep piece alone will challenge the heck out of you, you know? So anytime I'm talking to a mama who's done it on her own, it's just like, I want to bow at your feet and kiss your feet because seriously. And this piece around, okay, so raising boys and some girls, children, because we're getting into these gender fluid times, which is super
Absolutely.
Cool. So, you know, my son, he has his dad and my partner, and wrestling is a big way in which they interact and engage, and that my son is getting these physical needs for just bigger movement. You know, it doesn't necessarily mean it always looks rage-filled or aggressive, but it's meeting these needs. And I can't imagine what that must have been like raising Travis, and it was just you and him, right? So that was another thing. And like you said, it was, even though he's only 21, which really wasn't that long ago, we've been in the dark ages in so many ways around women's health, parenting, women, single mothers being supported. And so this feeling of like you're doing it alone. And so I'm curious about, you know, when he was younger, and it definitely sounds like the Society for Creative Anachronism met those needs.
Yeah, and that came a little bit later for us. I forget, maybe he was, I want to say 8. That was a little bit later, but you know, it was an intense experience to have my son, to be single, to be the sole provider, and to have an alternative way of, I don't think it's alternative, but to the people that were around me,
right?
A lot of the time I was doing it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the time I had to just like pull my field in. That's what I always say. I still say that. You have to keep your heart open, field in, you know, and just do my thing, because I talked and talked and talked and talked with Travis from before he could talk, you know, and that's just, you know, my whole thing with him was I respect his soul. I don't know everything. I haven't done this before. I'm doing the best I can to figure it all out. So I'm authentically wanting to make sure he recognizes that I respect his soul as we figure out how to walk through life. And it was sometimes very difficult, because I felt that people that I cared about around me questioned, oh, well, and it's very easy to say, oh yeah, well, you should spank him, or you should, whatever it is. And I was just like, I'm pretty stubborn. I had many opportunities as a single parent to be very humble, and request and help when I required it. And also it was like, I'm clear on this. And that's like one of the biggest things that I would like to share from having gone on the long journey from birth to 18. The journey's not over, of course, is to trust yourself. Trust yourself. And I know anybody probably listening to this would already have that with doctors, with teachers, with stand buyers that are looking at you while you're in the grocery store and there's a meltdown in emotion, and family. You know, I am happy to report that I didn't stop what felt right to me. And there was a lot of communication. Communication is like one of my core values. It's what I studied in school. And there came a time when Travis was middle school to high school, and he started to be able to do some pretty magnificent things. And he was involved in a program that was social emotional / leadership type of thing. And he was up in the front. He was one of the first 2 youth leaders, and he was facilitating emotional process with adults and youth. And I was able to see the people that they never said straight up to me what they would do, but I felt very judged at times to hear the acknowledgement for my persistence and my dedication to what was right in my heart with him. Like the seeds, you plant those seeds, and then to be able to see them sprout, but to be able to see them bloom, it's powerful. And so a message from me to you, whoever's listening, is you know. Stick with what you know. There's a lot of hunting for the right resource, the right homeopathic, whatever it is that you want to find the thing that's going to help settle whatever the current moment situation is. And they're going to keep coming, and there's going to be different stages, but and when you're in that place and you find that place of calmness, the resources, the answer comes. You just described it, Kara. Everything shifted when you became clear. Boom.
Right.
It shifted. Doors open. Resources appear. The support that you overhear something that, a book, whatever it is, it happens.
Yeah,
I would have liked to heard that more often, which is why I wanted to say that. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, I just want to take a few more minutes to wrap this up, and I wanted to end on the note around especially the flower essences and some of the homeopathy. So a few of those tools that you use with Travis, and maybe, when he was really young, because that tends to be who I'm talking to right now. And that was some of the feedback I've heard, is like women are interested and curious what and how.
Yes. Well, the first thing I'll say to that is, while I have studied the healing arts for many, many years, I am not a homeopathic doctor. And so what I will say first is that tapping into those professionals is key, because I could say I gave this to Travis and it did wonders, and it might not be the right thing for your child. It's situational, it's constitutional, like there's more to it than that, and it changes. So I was not always able to take him to see professionals. However, I did have those humble moments where I requested help if I required help, and through, especially in his young years, especially because it's so raw. It's not that it's that, okay, I'm frustrated, my boundary's been crossed, I'm going to bite you. That's a lot to deal with. And so I would take him to a couple of different types of practitioners. I mean, I can tell you easily that staples in our house were chamomilla, rescue remedy, lavender, Calms Forte. Those were always in my purse.
What was that last one?
Calms Forte.
Calms Forte.
Yeah. And when we get together, when we have the in-person, I can put a little worksheet together. There's some books that were like Bibles for me. Awesome. There are a couple of practitioners that really helped me. And I don't necessarily think it's who they were. It was their toolkits. But homeopathics with flower essences made all the difference in the world. And when Travis was very little, it was always a blend. I don't know if you're familiar with the modality called NET. Do you know NET?
I do it. I need some neural-emotional technique.
There you go. That was something that was done with him through the years, and very, very helpful. With the flower essences supporting that. As things got more intense with him and his expression of, and when you watch a child that's expressing rage, there's more to it. Like, there's more to it. And there are the basic needs that you're talking about with the little ones, but there's more to it. things happen. They get held in the body. Boundaries get crossed. Bullies are like, there's a lot of stuff that's going on. And I don't want to just throw the word bully out there because I have a lot of thoughts about that. I have compassion for the bully, the bullied, and all of it because I've been all of those things. But having a diverse approach to how you provide, whether it's a homeopathic, whether it's an NET session, whether it's sitting down and doing, body awareness, feelings, conversations, or going out and doing swords to get some energy out. That's really that was a secret sauce to me, is to do it all and be responsive. And I'm going to definitely type up the books that were my Bibles that helped me, because I didn't always have the cash to go see the professional that helped me. There's some great books that you can look for what's manifesting in your child. Yeah. And that's the approach that I recommend versus just my list of what we use. Yeah. Is that a good start? I think that there's a lot of juicy stuff that we can talk about when we're in person. And
yeah, I just wanted to say, you just reminded me of, so when we were moving through this phase, and I know it's going to come up again. I anticipate that. And, it's just like rolling with the flow. Ebbing in and ebbing out, or ebbing and what's the other word? Ebbing and flowing?
Ebb and flow?
Yeah, I guess ebb and flow and surge and all that. So with my son, right. So I really, like you said, it's more than just, basic biology. Our bodies do hold memory, and we're not there for every moment. We can't control every moment. We don't, the energies that are really intense on the planet and around the world, and they get picked up in all these public spaces and left behind. And so that was something I just always, and I continue to do, to remind ourselves and each other to lead with empathy. And so in the case of my son, it was, let's remember that he's been through a lot of transition. My partner and I have created this community family home, and we've lived here for like 20 months now. And we've had a lot of change in terms of roommates and children moving in with their parents and moving out. And, that it's not ideal, and we're not intentionally doing that, but it's life and we have to flow. Yeah. So he's had like 10 plus roommates. Like, that's a lot on a little being. Yes. So I just kept coming back to that, especially with my roommates now, because we're so involved in helping to raise each other's children. Is just like, let's just remember that empathy piece, that it's been a lot for this little body and being, and start from that place that and that always felt really good, and we all easily agreed that was the case. So all
the way through. It's new all the way through. And when my son started to be able to talk, I'd be blown away. He'd say, "This is the first time I've ever done this." Oh. It might not seem stressful to you. You've done it, but I've never done it. Whatever the situation was, and that's a great reminder. And having that compassion, like you said, in this situation and all the rest. Yeah. Beautiful.
So Leanne and I will be, we're going to meet again in person, which we're really excited about, this coming Wednesday, January 17th. We'll be meeting here at my home, which is also known as the Mamas and Papas Cooperative Encinitas. The home base is actually located in Cardiff, not too ironically, but we'll be here 10 to 12 p.m. and we're going to do something a little more experiential and hands-on. Like Leanne said, she'll offer more of her list of tools and resources, some of which she discussed over this past hour together online. But we invite you to join us. We have a learning garden for the children in the back, so babes at breast are always welcome. And then the toddlers would be invited to be with our learning garden area in the back, so that we can have a more mamas kind of focus. Papas, you're always welcome as well. And same thing, you know, I want to really be mindful of my language and just calling out sexism in me. And sometimes I'll say that when I'll have people here, because my literature for mamas and papas, I put papas in parentheses, is, you know, papas tend to work. They tend to be out earning the money, and us mamas are raising the kids. It doesn't have to be, and I don't mean to only reinforce those ideas. And yet that's the pattern we see. So that's why I tend to speak into it, but I'm so open to that pattern shifting into having the papas here on hand. It's so important for the kids to feel their energy and to get the need for male attention met inside of them. So, and then that also reminded me, you know, I thought of like this whole medieval, we were talking about medieval times, and I'm like, you know, but nowadays we're going to have to like raise our boys to be like, well, you know, back then we didn't ask for consent for the hug.
Oh,
Things have changed a lot, and now we're always asking for permission when it comes to touching anyone. And so yeah, it's fun, right? That is the opportunity. It's challenging in a sense because it requires more due diligence from us as these sometimes exhausted human beings. Yeah. And yet it's thrilling to be in this time. Like, we get to help lead the way in a sense, you know, coming out of this darkness into the light. So thank you, Leanne, for this conversation around creating more light in our lives as parents and how we're parenting our children, because they are these powerful light beings, and we want to retain that and foster it and cultivate it together to just transform our planet, really, right? That's why we're doing this, because we know that we're at this really crucial time in our history as human beings on planet Earth, and that we've got to be way more mindful with how we're living upon it, how we're walking gently with it. So really, that's why we're here doing this. So thank you for joining me on that pursuit. And I'm looking forward to Wednesday and to hugging you in person.
Yes.
Been too long. And everyone else, thank you for watching this, and we hope to see you Wednesday or at some other point in time to talk about how we can all just expand our consciousness and live our soul's purpose for why we're here now. So, Leanne, you want to say anything in closing?
No, just thank you for the opportunity to speak with you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I love you. Love everyone for watching, and not for watching, just for being. And have a great weekend, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.